right. Well, so great to talk to everybody, and greetings from Vilnius. I'm looking out. So I have a partnership in Open Circle Capital, which is a fund here, or a kind of a venture partnership. And we just spent 2 days going through about 20 companies. Uh, I think they're all Lithuanian companies. So plenty of um, plenty of ideas from all that. Um, but what I thought we'd do today is basically take parts of kind of two sessions, since we had to miss one, and then I'm going to give some extra color on these, and then in the final. So basically, taking session six, talking a bit about internal rate of return and other metrics, uh, and then some tips on managing boards of directors and shareholders, and a little bit about adding values to the companies. And then we'll actually do a kind of a larger review next week, and then finish up talking a bit about exits, and something about timing. Actually, it's a pretty interesting timing today. As you probably know, it's a big election in the U.S., basically the midterm election, um, and it looks like the Democrats are going to win the House of Representatives, and which means they're going to put a ton of pressure on Trump, which is going to be a very interesting dynamic, I think. Um, Something that's been missing for a while, and I'm not sure what'll happen. But all this is a little bit linked to this timing issue. Um, there could, because a lot of people are predicting that there could be a recession coming sometime soon, in particular in Europe and in U.S., or some sort of a turnaround. And that obviously brings to the point that it's better to be investing during recessions than selling companies. And that does so we'll talk some about timing aspects of investing next week as well. All right, so I'm going to run through a couple slides, just from the Finnish Business Angel Network, to talk about the internal rate of return. And the reason, okay, so yeah, just a small, there's 650 members here. And by the way, we'll do I'll host a visit for angels to Finland. I think the idea now is December 10th through 12th. And one of the things that we'll do here is there's a pitching evening of the Finnish Business Angel Association on the 11th, and so we'll be able to attend. Anybody who comes up here will be able to attend that and get some idea of how at least it works up here. But again, 650 angels last year, 27 million plus in investments. I think we looked at this earlier, so I'm not going to go through this. I'm going to talk more about the IRR, but I just pulled these again. As you recall, we started with 2 million of investments in 2010, and it's grown up to actually was maximum last year at 53 million. Last year it was 26 million. Since 2010, or I guess, yeah, 2010, 1,000 plus startup companies invested in 200 million. Here are the attributes. I know we touched this before, but I think it's worth repeating, that the median investment of per investor per round in Finland last year was 20,000 euros. The median total investment round size was 200,000, and median startup stake per angel was 1 to 2%. Median startup valuation was €1 million. On average, per angel per year was 1 to 2 startup investments. Sorry about there being a little bit of noise, but some of my colleagues are here. Um, uh, but that will clear up in a second. Um, 587 individual investments, 67% of the responding angels made an investment a given year. Here are the sectors. We looked at that already. But the thing I wanted to talk about was the internal rate of return. So internal rate of return is the method of calculating rate of return for angels and for VCs, basically. And so not going to dig in. We already looked in the valuation section, the venture capital methodology for calculating returns. So I'm not going to talk about the math here. It's a little bit less interesting. But it is worth saying that that the internal rate, the rate of return, doesn't really involve external factors such as inflation and cost of capital. It's just the absolute return, kind of compounded return per year you realize on your investments. So here's just an idea of what you could set your expectations at. And obviously these numbers fluctuate pretty wildly. But the last year when we did a survey measuring across the board, Finnish angels realized about a 3.7 times the money back, or an internal rate of return of 25%. And you can do the math if you want, but that's basically over on average a 5.5 year period for kind of earning returns on the capital. So again, measured in 2017, the median return on initial investments is 3.75 times the money back, which equated to a 25% return, which is actually pretty good benchmark. And it's basically, I think I've said before, again, the target of an angel is to get between 10 and 20 times their money back on a given case ex ante, so looking forward. But again, if you get on your portfolio on average 3.75 at the end of the day, that's pretty good. So again, it's always interesting to kind of look backwards and look forwards. If you look forward and we're looking at an individual investment, hoping to get 3.5 times your money back, that probably wouldn't be sufficient because, again, from the experience that many, if not most, of the companies don't return capital. But again, ex post, if on your portfolio you get 3.75, that's a pretty good result. So, like I said, looking again across the portfolio to basically to generate this type of a rate of return. The typical ownership at exit was 15%, and the median was 8.5%. Time used for due diligence was about 37 hours on average, with the median of 20. So if you remember back, we looked at a slide that showed that angel returns tended to be higher when you applied at least 20 hours of due diligence. So what you can imagine here is there are obviously many cases that had less than 20 hours, and then some that had much, much, much more than 20 to get this difference here. But again, what this looks like on it kind of at a median level, that's kind of it meets the kind of test of being about the right amount to do. Time used per startup per month is actually interesting. And I find this hard to believe, but what this tells you, the 28 hours, but I think what this tells you is that most of the angels are actually they're not working at the startup because that's about 3.5 days, 3 to 4 days a month. So it's saying that on average, about 4 days per month working with the startup, 3.5, 4 days. But the median is 10. So for the most case, companies were or angels were just waving to my colleagues here. Um, uh, so on a median basis, it was about 10 hours per month. I'll call you. I'll call you. All right. Um, yeah. And then percentage of investments made in investors' own industry sector again was 62%. So most of the investments made in Finland by angels are people that are investing in their own industry or an industry that they know about. So they're not coming simply as financial investors. And then the percentage of investments that were syndicated was about 79%. So almost all investments were done by two or more angels, as opposed to just going in by ourselves. Interesting result on exits, and I'm going to then switch back to the kind of international findings on IRR in a minute. But 37 of the exits were bankruptcies, 26% were trade sales, 10% were sold to another VC, which is actually becoming a new kind of kind of acceptable kind of exit because we're finding, at least in the best cases, that new VCs are willing to come in and pay pretty good multiples on old VCs. So or prior investors' money, so angel investors. So again, it's not widespread. I mean, I don't think it should be one of your targets in terms of who you sell, who you use, where your exit is eventually. But often it does turn out as a potential way to get liquidity. In a couple cases, in Finland at least, were very, very strong exits, 10 or 15 times the money back from uh, from from VCs. So it's definitely something worth watching. 9% were sold to other shareholders. 7% were only 7% were actually voluntary liquidations. So maybe adding these together, you get about 45% bankruptcies. 5% sold to other investors. 2% were management buyouts. 2% merger. 1% buyback of shares, and 1% IPO, which is definitely kind of stands to reason that it's a very rare occurrence to be able to get an IPO. So that all plugs into the kind of final internal rate of return results. So they measured how Finland, Suomi, as our kind of the Finns call themselves, compared to USA and UK, which basically showed that the results were in line, 22% to 27%. So Finland fell in between UK and US. Um, uh, the return on investments, so in UK, typically the holding period was a bit shorter, of 4 years. V is what I'm finished or years. So this 22% internal rate of return was a function of four holding years and 2.2 times money back. Here in U.S., it was even shorter holding periods of 3.5 years and 2.6 times money back. And then in Finland, it was 3.75s on average 5.5 years. So I think this is something something you can kind of expect that probably it's hard to guess that your standard investment you're going to hold less than 5 years. So you have to kind of look forward because I guarantee even though the typical investment was sold after 5.5 years. Probably the angels went in with the ambition of selling in 3 to 5 years. So, and I think as, kind of the maturity of the market goes, you may expect that, holding periods in Belarus will be 5 to 7 years, something like that. On average, or kind of on a median basis, because I think, again, best investments that go according to plan, go fast, they may certainly go in only 2 to 4 years, no question about it. Um, and then here, this was an interesting one as well. So the percent of investments generating percent of profit. So in these cases, these are all various studies, showed that 9% of investments generated 80% of the product profit. So the kind of Pareto diagram, or a distribution, that very small percentage of the investments generate the lion's share of the profits in UK, obviously similar in the US, and similar in Finland. So 10% of the investments generated 72% of the profit. And then, again, very standard findings here, 50 to 55% of the exits were better than 1 times the money back. So again, that's where I think you can in general expect, if you're targeting to have much more than half of your investments um, uh, give a positive payback, you're probably going to be disappointed at the end of the day. So you need to kind of kind of again target winners, and then monitor the companies closely and make sure that you don't keep doubling down on investments that don't look like they're headed in the right direction. So this is kind of my the first half of the talk. The idea to look at internal rate of return and what the reasonable expectations are. Um, Again, I'm sitting here in Vilnius, and Vilnius has just launched its business angel network, I guess earlier this year. Am I correct? I'm looking at my colleague here. Business angel network in Vilnius was launched, right? It was launched less than a year this year, during this year. Okay, so yeah, so I think Lithuania was the last of the Baltics, and I think actually, Belarus has launched about the same time. There's not going to be enough experience to kind of to measure too much for the first few years. Um, so I don't I think that in terms of what these numbers, the payout numbers are going to be really, they're driven by outliers, and having a few companies that succeed really, really well. So while these might be kind of reasonable expectations to reach after 3 to 5 years. Um, but again, I think it's difficult to predict how it's going to go. But I just wanted to show you this in the sense of kind of getting some benchmarks for what to expect. So this is the first half. The second half, I'm going to talk about boards of directors and how angels tend to handle those, and kind of some tips there. But Yuri, let me stop and ask: are there any questions at this point?
So the Finnish angels are most efficient in terms of return on investment.
Huh.
You
Yeah.
have the best expertise.
Well, it's a good. It's a. I wish I could say that's true. And you probably can't quite say it, because efficiency would mean kind of that both the, the times money back and the speed of exit were both better. In this case, the U.S. had smaller times money money back, but they got their money back a lot faster. And, same, UK even less but similar speed back. So I think what you can say about the Finns is the Finns tended to stay into the companies a bit longer, and before selling out, because what tends to happen is, okay, what if after the third or fourth or fifth year, the company doesn't look like it's going anywhere? What's your options as an angel? Well, one of them is to just kind of abandon ship and sell your shares back to the managers or someone else and basically liquidate them for only a small amount. So I think, in the US and UK, people tend to abandon ship earlier. But at the same time, they find companies that during that period are also paying off a lot. So I think this is all, almost on the same curve here between the holding period of 5.5 years and the amount of return. But I think, this is very respectable. 25% is, I think it's a good rate of return, and it shows, because again, the stock market returns over those years were on the order of, 15 to 18%. 25% was pretty good.
Okay, thanks.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, please.
Can
Yep.
you hold your microphone closer to your mouth? Because when you were seeing your volume out, it sounded very good. Now,
Okay. How about now? How about
Perfect.
now? Okay. Good. All right. Anything else that anybody wants me to go into here? Okay, we good to go?
Продолжаем.
Okay, good. All right. So let's talk a little bit about angels and how they perform on the board of directors. And so I'm going to talk through about, what are some kind of the key aspects of board meetings, both preparing for and then following them up. A little bit about experimentation on boards, which I actually think is an important thing. So how do you test your assumptions, test the startups' assumptions between board meetings? And then I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm uploading some sample meeting kind of templates, meeting slides, so different, but I'll talk through very briefly what are the key points to go through. Then what are the attributes of good and bad board members? And then actually I'm not going to do the global VC trends because we actually touched that, and I'll touch that a bit more next week when I'm there live. So okay. So generally when I make an investment, we almost immediately start scheduling out an annual, basically the next 12 months of board meetings. Generally, we're doing those every 1 to 2 months. So have a formal get together where we basically make decisions about funding issues or strategy issues, and then get the pulse of the company. And I think that's very wise to actually set up meeting times almost immediately, because they tend to, once a company starts getting going, it's really hard to nail down times. So here's some ideas about how to kind of handle the board as you're getting ready to start. So a couple, some principles. So the board meetings should be, hold on just a minute. I'm going to move to another room. It'll be, I'm going to move to another room so it just makes it easier here. No, that's okay. Yuri, can you see my slides still now?
Yes.
Good. All right. I'm just moving to a different room. All right. So these are just general findings from successful startups. So in the board meetings, and this is something I've generally found is oftentimes the CEO or the founders try to make it too complicated, but try to keep the kind of core subjects, and I'm going to show you some agendas in a moment. Keep it pretty simple and straightforward, and try to emphasize issues where you can make decisions. Definitely discussing failures and challenges very explicitly. One of the classic mistakes is that you only hear all the positive things in the meeting, and then actually they're holding back a lot of negatives. So you'll see one of the slides from the template I use is always what are the challenges for the next 3 to 6 months. Then definitely showing some accountability. So show what we're committed to in prior meetings. See what the budget is and how the team's performing relative to the budget. And then this kind of SMART plans, specific, measurable, attainable, responsible, and time bound. That's kind of an acronym that's used a lot. So emphasize when you're doing the board meetings that follow up on all the issues that were challenged, were showing up as challenges earlier. Then just keeping the language simple and straightforward. Again, don't try to. I think as an angel, a lot of times you're coming from a corporate environment, and maybe the idea is to kind of you kind of associate professionalizing the board with making it more complicated. So trying to turn the startup into a corporate. So again, all of this is towards keeping it lean and simple. And then, of course, making sure the board of directors is being helpful. Let me say a word here is that in general, if you're a group of angels, I would ask to have the right for the angel group, the syndicate, to propose a board member. Again, I have to defer because I don't know the Belarus system kind of, but I'm assuming actually that it's moving towards kind of the European one, where every company needs to have a formal board of directors. So in general, we want the angels to get a seat on the board, and then maybe you choose amongst the syndicate, the group that's invested, the person with the most kind of industry know-how to go on to that board. Okay, so frequency, as I've mentioned, typically 2 to 3 meetings per quarter. Meetings tend to be 2 to 3 hours. But can be less. I mean, I try to make them between 1.5 and 2 hours. Make sure that the CEO kind of prepares the material, but actually talks to the board members, so he makes sure that he's getting all the key issues reported from the board members before, so it can be brought up in the meeting. sending the deck out a couple days in advance. Buy-in on anything controversial individually. So again, this is an issue that in general, you don't want a lot of surprises in the board meeting. So if you can get the founder to, and if you have issues as a board member with the others, try to work them outside of the meeting, so it doesn't get stuck in a war during the board meetings. Then short deck, usually 10 pages or so, with content that will be covered during the meeting. During the meeting, again, not going to go through all of this. In general, I'm doing most of these now. It's video conferences. It's much, I think actually having a couple physical meetings per year is good, but video conference is actually more efficient in general than physical meetings. Yeah, keeping everybody focused. Administrative issues. Definitely get into have minutes taken from each meeting and then approve them at the next meeting. That becomes a huge issue, obviously, when you're dealing with granting options and compensation in particular, as well as deals that may be considered. So make sure that there's a paper trail of what's been decided. Most of this, again, I'll put it up so you can kind of see it as a tool, as a template. I'm not going to go through all of these. One, other point, look forward. So make sure that only, maybe half to 2/3 of the meeting is about looking backwards. But I mean, definitely there should be enough time to look at strategy over the next 6 to 12 months, as opposed to just making decisions about the past. And again, I have to say, I now actually counted just yesterday, I'm on 17 board of directors, or at least I'm an observer on a number of them, but I'm on many of those, and many of the meetings end up just talking about, looking at financial statements and don't spend enough time with strategy. So I would say that's really something that you need to work on. Make sure that strategy is given enough time. After the meeting, getting closure on each topic, make sure that we know who owns it, assign responsibilities, make sure that they deliver the results. Sometimes, so usually in the board meetings, there are obviously the board members as well as the CEO. There's always the CEO. Sometimes the CEO is also a board member. Sometimes the CEO may be the chairman of the board. In general, if it's possible, I prefer that unless the CEO is a major shareholder, which sometimes happens, if they're a major shareholder, then yes, it makes sense that they also be on the board. But if they're only a small shareholder, then generally I want to see that the CEO is reporting to the board, but it's not part of it. Yeah, looking at good and bad, making sure that the CEO is not only reporting what's all the good stuff, but it's also highlighting the weak points. Yeah, I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but there's really good material from Steve Blank on, he titles it. So Steve Blank, I think some of you at least, I've shown at least one video of him, but he's pretty much the leading entrepreneurial thought leader in the U.S. And he's written a series of blog posts and then some videos about why board meetings suck and how to fix them. One of his biggest point is because a startup is an organizational, basically a form organization formed to search for a repeatable and scalable business model. So it's not a operating kind of on a well-known business model in a well-known market. Because of that, you need to treat board work a little differently. In that sense, should be discussing experiments. So, maybe experiments with what types of customers to be going to, pricing models and things like that. So again, it makes sense that each board meeting that you kind of review what are the assumptions of the startup's business model and make sure that those are bearing out in life or in kind of real life. So again, maybe if let's take pricing for example. So if you're looking at a company with a software as a service business model that's charging $10 per user per month, and it doesn't seem to be getting the new users that you expected, or they're not converting into paid users. Maybe you're getting free users but not converting to paying. Then maybe you want to introduce an experiment where you kind of choose some subset of potential customers and test it with a lower price, and then kind of report on that at the next board meeting. So again, use the board as a place to test possible pivots of the business model, and again, assess whether those tests work. And this is again kind of advice to the founders, but make sure that the founders that you're backing are looking for board members to challenge them, and not just to kind of rubber stamp what their kind of hypotheses were in the beginning. Not going to go in these. I'll leave these. I'll actually put these up later so you can kind of look at some of those. But let's look at the typical agendas. So obviously date, we generally...
Oh, sorry.
Please,
we're missing your slides. They're stuck on way back.
You can't see?
Oh, your avatar for now.
Oh. How's my audio?
Perfect.
Okay, audio's perfect, but you can't see my screen.
Yeah, the video is gone.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if I can fix that. All right. Share screen. So now you'll get the infinite loop.
Yes.
Okay. How about now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. In this works too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. All right. So typical agenda. So generally, I ask the CEO to take notes, or if he brings somebody with him, you might even bring in a kind of a secretary to take the notes. 5 to 7 components, consistent structure in every meeting, highlighting urgent, time-sensitive items to make sure that they get covered in good time. And then I think really important is always in every board deck to insert a mission statement and objectives of the company to make sure that everybody remembers and is aligned on how to present the company. So again, this is too much detail for discussing here, but I'll just bring up a few points. So this would be the first board meeting after closing a venture round, and actually I'm going to do one of those on Friday. So several things. Make sure that the accounting processes are in place. Establish the the threshold of board approval of actions. So again, usually when you're making the deal, basically in board meetings, to be honest, in 20 years of doing board meetings, I think I can remember maybe on one hand the number of times I've actually voted on any decisions. So in general, decisions are unanimous and clearly unanimous, but only obviously you need to establish in the shareholder agreement your what the voting thresholds are for key decisions. Generally, it's 60% or 2/3 majority necessary to make critical decisions. Another key thing is conflicts of interest, being able to make sure that if, for example, the company is doing a strategic partnership or customer agreement with a company that one of the board members is associated with, to make sure that that person has limited or doesn't participate in voting. And again, you'd only take something like that in a meeting if it's really a large value. So generally, you would probably even explicitly put that in the shareholders agreement that strategic partnerships that are valued at more than $100,000 should be decided at board level or something like that. So my point here is make sure to pull out any board members that have conflicts of interest. I just had, well, it was not me, but a good friend of mine who's actually speaking at the Global Entrepreneurship Week next week. His name is Alex Sazanoff. He recently had a pretty large conflict of interest with one of his board members, and eventually they had to kick the guy out. But again, that doesn't necessarily, just because a board member has a conflict of interest on a specific issue, perhaps a kind of strategic alliance, doesn't mean they should be kicked off the whole board necessarily. But at least make sure that if you're actually voting on a key issue like that, you have all the information necessary to find if someone has a conflict of interest. Actually, I don't agree with this one. So in general, again, at a startup level, you don't have separate committees. It's basically the whole board. So again, you just need to establish who on the board is in charge of negotiating salaries with the key management team. But generally, I don't have a committee. It's more of an individual on the board. Discuss if additional board members are necessary and how you're going to find them. Frequency and schedule of future board members, obviously. How information to the board is going to be shared. So in general, we use Dropbox or Google Drive, or at least a secure platform that people are comfortable with in terms of sharing documents. Looking at the key performance indicators and indicators and formal milestones that are in front of you, and then review a draft budget. So this, in general, all of my companies, we come up with a budget in October, November, and adopt it in the December meeting, and then we track that over the following year, and I think that's pretty normal practice. So here's a typical slide from a kind of a generic meeting, but again, gives the board the agenda items here, who the presenters are, and the time and minutes that they have available to speak. And I think this is really important to have because again, you tend to run out of time in these meetings unless you're pretty carefully timing the individual elements. Then first, the CEO gives a highlight, kind of an overview of of what's happened in the last period. Again, key challenges, customer highlights, key goals, employee updates, if, who's been hired and fired. Um, there's generally a product strategy section. Um, uh, so again, highlights, what the, have a product roadmap, where we are on that roadmap, any new product initiatives, any kind of new understanding about the economics. Um, then a look at the metrics that are going to be followed based on the product. Customer feedback. This is actually something that I always ask for in the meetings is um, some testimonials or indications of what customers like and don't like. And then if there's any kind of departures from what we've expected, what's the, again, this is the CEO speaking, that they should kind of propose that there should be some changes to that strategy. Metrics dashboard. So again, and this is why I think it's important that if you do want to go on a board of directors, that you choose a segment or an industry where you're pretty well associated with what the key metrics are. So these are just an example of some that are common in the web and mobile and software as a service space. But again, there should be some sort of a dashboard that's tracking the key metrics. A look. This is one that deserves kind of a lot of time looking at the customer pipeline, and hopefully the company is using some sort of a cloud-based CRM, customer relationship management tool to follow the prospects. A probability of closing, how long they've been there, forecasting revenue opportunities and timeline. So prior forecasts and actuals for all relevant fields. So basically, sales is of course the lifeline of every startup as soon as they get to market. So this is something that I pay really close attention to and try to track, again, if deals are hanging, how customer deals are hanging in the pipeline too long, we need to figure out what it is that's making the sales cycles so slow. So here's kind of again, an example. You've probably seen similar ones, but kind of a look at the deal size, the pipeline status, the likelihood of closing, when they expect to close, who's the owner of the deal, and how long it's been in the pipeline. So this is definitely a critical element of coordinating. Recruiting issues, who are the key hires that came in, how much they cost to get. So things like how much are you investing in making key hires? Again, it's very early stage startups. In general, I'm not using recruiters for those. So, in a sense, the cost of hiring is pretty low, but certainly something you should look at when you're obviously scaling up the company. And then forecast for the future and, how to use social media presence, stuff like that. Then definitely a financial overview, kind of a snapshot of most important, the cash burn rate, so the current burn rate, and given that burn rate, how long can the company last, how many months? Detailed budget, if again, where available. So, and I actually will put another deck up that shows a little bit more specifically how I like to see this, I guess. But I like to see the budget versus the actual figures for revenues and key costs. And then I also like to see what the, based on this, what the forecast going forward is. So here, what's the future forecast for the cash balances over the next 6 to 12 months? Forecasted revenues and operating expenses. So in general, I want to obviously here use this as a chance to measure how we're doing, but then, do we need to, are our forecasts reasonable for the future so we can make a correction if possible? And then like to have as much detail as possible attached, but in general, I generally ask them to give a profit and loss, the most recent profit and loss statement as an attachment. I usually don't ask for the balance sheet, often want cash flow also. But so cash flow and profit and loss are generally what I would like. A detailed attachment to the board material, but we're not going to go through them unless it's really necessary. Then, again, kind of a board discussion, and these will be different every time, but often you're, of course, going to want to discuss what the fundraising needs are based on how much time you have left, how much runway you still have. Definitely looking at what are the needs from the company, meaning that from the management team, what kind of help do they need from the board, and try to organize that help while you're either face to face on video or together. And then, again, here are just some questions, again, with very early companies trying to flesh out, is the business model we're operating on right now the right one? Are we trying to do too many things at the same time? Maybe, are we addressing the right customers? So some other just kind of general questions. But again, at the end, you want to have some sort of a general discussion where you can pull out ideas from the board that maybe didn't come in earlier. Then here's the things, if possible, to attach to each board meeting. Frankly, in general, I don't have this much data, and I probably should. There have been a lot of times I've wished I would have been able to kind of track the organizational chart of the company over the year. But again, anything kind of important that you're not going to cover in detail in the board, but you want the board members to have access to should be obviously attached. So that's kind of a description. So if you kind of step back, if I look at this, this is about 10 slides, right? So this is kind of a possible layout for the template for operating the company. Last parts, so these are just some things I pulled off a couple different websites, but I think that at least resonated with me as true. So definitely want even tempers, so not to have kind of two hot-headed board members. Definitely want board members that are independent thinkers and will push back on the management rather than just rubber stamping. And I do think this is a role that angels should take, because again, often the angels come in and the other board members are other founders. So they're always going to support each other. So you should take your role as one to kind of question the status quo and see if something should change. I definitely want proactivity, willing to put in time, because again, as a board member, it's definitely going to take, whereas a standard angels may be spending a day or two a month with the company, a board seat is going to mean spending some extra time. Having good networks, so ability to make introductions, good strategic thinking on that specific industry or on some horizontal kind of functional role in the company. So maybe a strong marketing or finance person. Obviously, kind of perceptive in being able to spot when something serious is happening. And again, this is just the general problem that companies go, if there's nothing dramatically wrong with the company, they've got plenty of runway, the sales are doing okay, it's still, you want to be testing some new things to see if you can ramp it up a little bit at a little bit higher performance level. Obviously, you want board members who are following kind of best industry practices, as well as being willing to kind of mentor and spend a lot of time giving feedback to the management team, and particularly the CEO. Attributes of bad board members. Sometimes I feel this way, and I've tried to get off of a number of boards recently. So overly scheduled, impossible, missing board meetings, bad, just not listening to the CEO or other board members. Spending too much time maybe on details is another attribute of a board member. Being too confrontational or not kind of giving enough, just making a negative atmosphere in the board meeting amongst the board members, as well as is maybe the management team. So, I really, and I think this is something I'm generally pretty good at, is making sure at the end of the meeting that everybody is, feeling positive and ready to take on the challenges. And then, of course, just people being negligent and ignoring what's going on in the company, best practices, and then, just doing things that could be destructive to the company. Here are the main, so from an angel perspective, here's what all the reports kind of show. These are the key things that entrepreneurs want from angels. They want, ability to help recruit, ability to help fundraise, strategic advice, making connections, saving time. So, if you have ways, if you've seen ways for the team to act more efficiently or something. So I think this is actually a little bit of a hidden gem here. Anything to help the productivity of the team. Any of you that are entrepreneurs realize that, typically I think management team members are not as efficient as they can be. So anything you can help them kind of regarding efficiency, risk management, evaluating the CEO and being able to kind of keep him or her in line, help them succeed, but also to know when they're out of their depth and actually need a new CEO to come take over. And then finally, obviously, watching to help the company get a successful exit at the end of the day. That's definitely kind of a key role you're going to take. But I think these are, a lot of times to get into the best deals, you have to sell yourself as an angel, why they should take your money instead of not taking any money or taking somebody else's. And I think if you can adequately kind of look at yourself and think about, which of these things you can bring to the table what types of companies can you bring these things to the table for. It'll help you kind of create your strategy of which companies to invest in. Because again, I always find this, and I was just debating that here with a number of the companies we were looking at, you know, whether you can do these things well highly depends on what type of company that you're talking about. Again, I met a company here today who was in the kind of selling kind of licensed software to telcos, and you know, I felt that I couldn't help the company on pretty much any of these attributes. Whereas there were several companies that were in segments that I understood better, had a better network in, and I immediately thought of a lot of things I could do for them. So again, this is where if you can sell these aspects, some or all of these aspects to an entrepreneur, it's you have a really good chance of getting in at a good price, because I think that's in general, entrepreneurs will take your money if you pay a high price. That's, you know, it's not that's generally something that's not in debate. The question is, can you get in at a reasonable price and kind of help the company grow and lead to one of those kind of good exit scenarios and get a good IRR at the end of the day. So that is basically what I had today, but I do want to maybe go back and just make this linkage one more time, because I think what we just went through are tools to help you get to these good rates of return on investment. And so, you know, I always think about this as anytime I have a good experience with a company, you know, it was really a combination of all the things we've looked at, you know, selecting the right companies, identifying the right teams, getting in at the right price, then, you know, kind of helping the company management manage forward, and controlling the company properly, and then selling at the right time. And kind of if you can do all of that, you've got a healthy shot at having a pretty good rate of return on investments. So that's my talk for today. So next week, so a couple things. The things I want to look at next time. I want to look at kind of some general environmental conditions and strategies for different segments of the kind of economy. And then very particularly, how can we think about positioning companies for the best possible exits? So we'll do that live, and I think it's the 13th. I know that I guess Nina will be in communication about the exact time. But really looking forward to coming down. And so if you have any special requests, send me an email or Nina an email. If there's some specific things that you feel you haven't gotten out of this that you'd like to learn more about, I could definitely kind of build in some things that you're specifically interested in. So I really encourage you to do that, because I would like to obviously make this as relevant as possible. Okay, so Yuri, any questions or comments there?
Каким образом вознаграждаются члены совета директоров и в какой момент им надо
How are
что-то
board
платить?
members rewarded, and at what time?
Say that again.
Закончите вопрос. В какой момент что?
В какой момент, каким образом, во-первых, вознаграждаются члены совета директоров?
So the first question was, how are the board members rewarded? What is the rewards and compensations to board members?
Can you repeat that one more time a bit more slowly?
Okay, the rewards to the board of directors.
Right. Good. Good question. Okay. So generally what I ask for is some extra options. So usually, so the boards I'm on, sometimes they pay a cash compensation, um, but it's very low, maybe 500 euros or 1,000 euros for a year. But I get an extra set of options, and I believe so. So that's the answer. So generally, as a board member, you might be able to get an extra, few tenths of a percent of the company as options, as opposed to other angels. So you're definitely making a good point that as a board member, you have to do two things that the other angels that are just investing don't have to do. One is you have to spend more time. Second is you take on some responsibility and some risk. Um, so what I think I shared that sweat equity contract, but if I didn't, I'll put that up into the shared drive. But it gives you an idea that, again, if you're going to spend a couple days per month with the company, then you deserve somewhere between, in my view, just throwing numbers out, but I'd say 0.3, 0.4, 0.5% options. So again, if all the angels are investing and only one is taking on the board membership, then they definitely deserve some compensation there. I think it's different in some markets. It's common to pay cash, but again, since these companies tend to be cash constrained, they don't really have a lot of cash to pay out. So, kind of a general rule would be to think, okay, how much time am I spending based on the board membership itself? So let's say it's 2 days a month that you have to do above what other investors do. Then think of what your kind of daily rate you would charge in a kind of a professional company, and then think of what the percentage value that is as a percentage of the value of the shares. So, and then that would be kind of the guideline of how much options. So, say if you got a grant of options every year, you take and expected, let's say, 6 board meetings per year. I would say, okay, I'm going to spend 2 days times 6. So in a way, well, actually, I would generally think of it on a monthly basis. So even if there are only 6 board meetings, I'd say, okay, I'm spending 2 days a month because I'm a board member. So that's 24 days. Let's say if the kind of daily rate would be, pick a simple number, 1,000 euros a day, 24,000 euros, then I would say, okay, I would like to have basically free shares in that amount or options. And that, of course, depends on where the company is located, how options are treated. But I think that's actually, which is, of course, an interesting question for most companies from Eastern Europe, is where would you like to domicile in Europe or US? And then you have to look a little bit at the taxation issues there. But I've kind of overcomplicated this a bit. Just it's mainly kind of a negotiation that's had when you place the investment, if you agree to go on the board, and you just try to construct a compensation package that motivates you to spend that extra time. I can give, like I said, I'll give some ideas how to structure that in the in this shared drive.
Okay, thank you.
Will, question. I think
вопрос.
we missed meeting or
Мы пропустили одно заседание.
1 week we failed to meet
В одну неделю мы не смогли
at
встретиться.
the beginning.
В
So
самом
we have
начале.
1 meeting left or 2.
У нас одна встреча осталась.
I think it's one.
Одна. У нас одна осталась. Мы сегодня догнали.
Can you hear me? I think the only so we scheduled 8 sessions.
У нас было по
and I
графику
think
8
we've had
сессий.
7 sessions. We
7?
will have had 7 sessions.
Мы бы провели. Сейчас была бы
By the end.
7-я.
So
В конечном итоге. И 8-я потом.
we covered all the topics.
Мы
and
осветили
so
все
the
темы.
other thing is it's fine with me also to have another session online
Я тоже
after next week. But
мог
I
бы
think
провести
we
еще одну
covered
сессию,
all of
онлайн-сессию на следующей неделе, если понадобится. Но, по-моему, мы все уже охватили, все темы.
Okay.
One more question.
Just
Помимо инвесторов разных стадий и основателей компании, топ-менеджеров компании, кого стоит включать в совет директоров?
So besides investors at various stages, who deserves a spot in the board of directors, apart from other investors, apart from management team, who deserves a spot on the board?
So Yuri, can you repeat that slowly?
Yes, okay. So the question was, who, apart from the board managers, apart from other investors, who deserves a spot in the board? So who deserves a place in the board?
So
Понял.
it's a great question. So
Отличный вопрос.
generally, the investors get
Обычно
to
инвесторы
select one board member.
выбирают одного члена совета директоров.
Generally, the
назначают.
founders will recommend either
И обычно
one.
учредители одного или двух рекомендуют в совет директоров.
If I say
Это именно порядок назначения.
ideal situation, I think.
Если рассмотреть
Founders,
идеальную
at least
ситуацию,
if this is an initial aim,
если это, по крайней мере, первоначальное,
choose one member, usually
Здесь
amongst themselves.
твой
So if
звук
there are
уплыл на
three
пару
founders,
секунд.
one of those would sit on the board. Then,
Well, could you please repeat that? I lost a couple seconds of your...
sorry, the internet's not perfect here.
Да, у меня с интернетом здесь проблемы, видимо.
Hold on.
Сейчас, секунду.
So the founders would
Итак, учредители,
recommend, would nominate one board.
основатели назначают одного человека, номинируют.
The investors would nominate
Инвесторы
one board member.
номинируют одного члена совета
And
директоров.
then the
И затем
third member, so generally
третий член совета директоров, обычно это,
board members.
обычно их трое. Так, и опять у Уилла очень плохо слышно.
It's not smart to make a big board in the beginning.
Не
You
очень
don't want
умно
5
раздувать
people.
совет директоров до очень большого количества. То есть более 5 человек это перебор.
It's really at the end of the day about making decisions, and it's much easier.
В конечном
for
итоге
people
совет
to make
директоров
decisions
создается для того, чтобы принимать решения. А решения принимать гораздо проще,
So
если
the
не слишком
question
много
is
людей
generally
участвует.
who the third member of the board.
То есть
Is it a
вопрос,
member
откуда
of the
взять
investor
третьего
side,
члена
or
совета директоров?
member of the
Инвесторы
founder side,
назначают или
or is it
учредитель назначает?
independent?
Или третий
in
вообще независимый
general,
человек, независимое лицо?
That the third
Will, you keep dropping, we keep losing you.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure. Let me change to see if I can. Yuri, how's this? Is this any better?
Sounds much better. Try that.
It is better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, Good. So the founders generally
Хорошо.
nominate
Учредители
one board
обычно
member.
назначают одного
The
члена совета
investors
директоров.
generally nominate
Инвесторы
one board member.
тоже
And
одного.
then there's a
И
third
затем
member
возникает
that's
вопрос.
generally
Третий
kind
член
of
совета директоров.
agreed
Это
amongst
обычно
both the
компромиссный
investors
вариант,
and the
который
founders.
устраивает и учредителей, и
And often that person is
основателей,
put
и
as
инвесторов.
chairman. So the best
И обычно этот
organized
человек
way
как
to
раз и
do it
становится председателем совета
is to
директоров.
get
Как это лучше
to have a
организовать?
third party who's
Лучше, чтобы
independent.
была третья независимая сторона в этом
Now,
процессе,
when you're
в
going in as an
основании
angel in the
совета
first
директоров.
round,
Но
you
если
know,
вы заходите в первый
oftentimes
раунд,
the
как ангелы,
founders will, since
первый
the
раунд
founders will
инвестиций,
generally still
очень
own
часто
80% of the company or
учредители в этот
more,
момент владеют 80 и более процентами компании.
often they will
Акционерный
have
капитал
two
еще
and the
не
angels
разбавлен.
will have one.
И часто
And so that's not unusual.
они, ангелы, назначают по одному члена совета директоров. Это обычное дело.
Again, it depends, but you know, the way I like
Опять-таки,
to
все
think
зависит
about
от
it, it
ситуации.
just should be,
Как
you know,
я
the three people.
предпочитаю об
So
этом
in general, I
думать.
strongly believe that the board should be three people.
3 человека. Я очень
Unless
придерживаюсь
there's
того
a
мнения,
strong
что
reason to make
необходимо
more.
и отталкиваться
And then,
от этого числа. Если,
just
конечно,
that
нет
the-
какой-то обоснованной
you need
причины
to find a
брать
way
больше
to
людей.
find the three people with the best insight into the business.
Ну и, конечно, эти 3 человека
on that
должны
board.
иметь наилучшее представление о той отрасли,
As
о
well,
том
and you
сегменте
know,
бизнеса, в
in
котором работает
addition
компания.
to someone from the
собирается работать.
investors and
Дополнительно
someone
к
from
этому,
the founders. I've seen cases. There's certainly cases
я наблюдал
where
случаи,
if
были однозначно
the
случаи,
angels are taking a very small percentage of the company,
если когда ангелы брали очень маленькие процентные доли, 2-5%, тогда они не получали, то есть это слишком миноритарное акционерство, тогда они не получали право назначить члена совета директоров.
And then the other thing I would say is
И
it's
еще
not
один момент, который я
necessarily,
хотел бы отметить,
you know, there are a lot of cases where I don't want,
есть очень
or
много случаев,
me or a representative of my
наблюдал
fund, for
очень
example, I
много
don't
случаев,
necessarily want a
когда
board membership.
я
because
или представитель
there's
моего
another
инвестиционного фонда не хотят
on
занимать
the
место
team
совета директоров.
that just has better
Потому что
insight.
мы видим,
So
что есть
I'm
инвестор в
often
команде,
happy
другой
not to be
инвестор,
on the
который
board, and then you know,
может
you
стать
can provide a lot
членом
of
совета директоров и
support to
гораздо
the
больше
company
помочь проекту, потому что в силу
outside of the
большего опыта.
board, either
Вы
as
можете
a kind of a
принести
pro bono
немало пользы компании
mentor,
и не
advisor,
будучи в
or
совете
as a paid
директоров.
advisor.
Это менторство, это
And
консультации,
again,
оплачиваемые,
what I
бесплатные, в
would
духе доброй
emphasize in
воли.
general is
Вы
when
можете
you
помочь
invest,
компании, не будучи членом совета
you
директоров.
know, you need to be ready to spare some
Если
time
вы
for free
готовы
for the
инвестировать, то
company.
будьте готовы
But if it
потратить
starts
некоторое
getting
время
too
бесплатно
high,
на благо
then you should
стартапа. Но
definitely
если
ask
стартап
for
идет
some
в
sort
гору,
of
то, конечно,
compensation,
нужно и
in
обоснованно
the
требовать
form
какую-то
of
компенсацию за потраченное время, за
of
приложенные
options.
усилия, может быть,
In
не в
general,
форме денег, а в форме
of
опциона.
free shares or
В
options.
общем и целом, да, то есть это бесплатные акции или опцион на покупку.
Is that it?
Ответил на вопрос?
Can you hear okay, Yuri?
Yes, it was a bit better this time, so I guess we covered the question.
Okay, good.
Есть уточнение или довольны ответом? Так, а теперь вы прерываетесь очень сильно.
Слышно меня? Нормально все?
Вот теперь да.
Вопрос, когда вот необходимо создавать совет директоров? Ну, к тому, что, допустим, если там какой-то небольшой...
Начало вопроса пропало. Что там к совету директоров когда?
Когда необходимо, вот в какой момент, да, необходимо создавать совет директоров? Ну, потому что стартап там может быть совсем еще только в зародыше, то есть мы там вошли, да, как ангел.
Well, at which point does it make sense to create the board of directors? Because the startup can be at the very, very early, at the pre-seed stage, basically. Does it make sense to establish a board at that time?
Yeah. So it definitely gets more professional at that point. You know, sometimes.
Лучше да.
So I think
Иногда.
it makes sense to have. So first of all, I just don't know what the kind of formal.
Прежде всего, я скажу сразу, я не знаю, есть ли какое-то формальное требование в Беларуси создавать совет директоров на раннем этапе. В Финляндии, я знаю, что в Литве, в большинстве стран Евросоюза необходимо создать совет директоров. Но это может быть один человек вначале. То есть это формальное, скорее, образование. Когда компания основалась
no need for
перед
kind
тем,
of
как придут
formal board
какие-то
work,
сторонние
but there
деньги,
is
то не будет
usually a
какого-то
need
формального совета
for
директоров,
a
не будет смысла в
director
ней.
to be there.
Но, по
So
крайней мере,
generally in
директор
Finland, you
должен там
need
быть.
one director
В
and
общем, в
one
Финляндии это один
kind
директор,
of
один
deputy director.
замдиректора.
But when does a formal board work start and needing to have,
Когда начинается формальная работа
the kind
совета?
of regular meetings?
Когда начинаются регулярные
In my
встречи?
opinion,
Ну, я думаю,
it
что
starts as
обычно это
soon as if
происходит,
there's kind of more than just friends and family
как только
money into
в
the company. So in
стартапе
general,
фигурируют уже не только деньги членов семьи и друзей.
if there's
Когда приходит действительно сторонний
significant
инвестор,
amount of angel money in
когда
there, in
приходит
my view, there
особенно
should be a
серьезный
board of
процент
directors
или
that
серьезный
meets
объем
regularly.
ангельских
But
инвестиций,
then when the venture
тогда да,
capitalists come
нужны
in, for
регулярные
sure,
встречи
that's
сверху
when
часов, совет
you need
директоров
to
заседает.
expand the board and have much
Также
more
необходимо
formal
расширять
processes.
совет директоров на более поздних этапах
Was that the
роста,
question?
формализовать некоторые процессы. Это отвечает на вопрос на ваш?
Да, спасибо.
Yes, thank you.
Еще один вопрос, one more question.
There's one more coming.
На ранней стадии стартап
So
получает
at
первые
early
деньги,
stages, the startups receive,
отдает там 15-20%.
they give away 15 to 20% of shares.
Совет директоров формируется из 3 человек, и
And the
у
board
стартапа
consists of
свое
3
одно
people.
место. То есть фактически стартап теряет контроль, хотя у него остается 80% доли. Не демотивирует ли это фаундеров, команду и так далее? И как с этим бороться или
So that's the question. So, for example, the startup only lost like 20% of shares. For that, they lose control of the company because the investors now get to appoint a member of the board, and that member of the board could vote against or could run counter to the founder's choice. So how is that managing? How is that being managed?
Sorry, I somehow I'm just not getting. Can you try that one more time, a little bit slower, and
All right.
hopefully I can understand.
So the connection on my side is also not perfect. Can you hear me?
I can, but it's just the quality is not good. I don't know
Right.
what's going on.
Okay, I'll try to speak slowly and in more detail. Basically, the question is, the startup only gives away around 15 to 20% of the shares at its initially, right? Only 20% of stock. And for that, they're supposed to have a guy from the investors, for that minority share, essentially, 80 to 20. For that 20% of lost stock, they get a guy to breathe down their neck, basically, to sit on the board and call the shots. So is that somehow traded off, or is there a balance to this?
Sorry, but I could. It's just broken up so bad. I can't.
Да, у нас что-то со связью ближе к концу вечера пошло совсем не
So I
так.
wonder if we should take that next week. So
Может быть, давайте на следующей неделе рассмотрим этот вопрос
I can
вживую, чтобы у
definitely-
нас не было проблем с
We'll be
интернетом
face
здесь.
to face, so it'll
Мы
be
уже
a lot
вживую
easier to
пообщаемся,
handle.
и будет гораздо проще ответить на этот вопрос.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, great. Hey, thanks everybody for the time.
Хорошо,
and
тогда всем
I
большое
think this
спасибо
will- I
за
really look forward to
проведенное
being
время.
there face to face next week.
Жду с
and
нетерпением
definitely
прилета
we
в Минск
can-
на
we can
следующей
go
неделе,
into,
пообщаемся
a lot of
вживую и,
other
конечно,
stuff.
ответим
So
на этот и на
feel free
многие
to
другие
either
вопросы.
email me or
Пожалуйста,
through
пишите
Nina,
письма
tell any
напрямую,
topics
через
that you
Нину,
wanna have.
озвучивайте темы, которые вы хотели бы
and we'll take
раскрыть,
those.
чтобы я раскрыл. И
So
мы,
thanks
конечно,
everybody, and I'll see you next week.
я дополню свою презентацию. Всем спасибо, до следующей недели. Thank you, have a good one.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.